Listening to podcast is no replacement for real training. While we attempt to provide accurate commentary, we hold no responsibility on how you use the information we provide. Get medical training. In the blink of an eye, everyday order can be replaced with once-in-a-lifetime chaos. Be prepared. This is the Civilian Medical Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Civilian Medical Podcast. This is episode 79. I have my co-host Bobby with me, and then we have a guest this month. It's going to be Jessica. I saw you on Matthew's Tactical Comms podcast, and so I was like, all right, if she can go on his podcast, surely she'll come down to ours. So I sent the invitation out, and you were like, sure, I'll come. I know you're super busy, so thank you for giving us a little bit of time. I'll let you introduce yourself, but I'll just say you're awesome. We've done we've done some cool stuff together over the last few years. I've been friends for a while, so just want to say you're awesome, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so I've known you for a little while now. I've met Bobby today. Thank you so much for having me be a part of your podcast. But just a little background about me. Went to college originally for meteorology. And so that's where I kind of started off and started my career off on the broadcast side. So I worked at television stations from Pennsylvania to Texas. And then I ended up here in South Carolina in Myrtle Beach. And then after about 6 years or so, I was trying to figure out how I could still use my degree, but maybe in a different way. And that's where I found myself in emergency management. So I started off with the South Carolina Emergency Management Division for a couple of years and then made my way to Greenville County, South Carolina, when they were looking for an emergency planner. And then I made my way up the ranks from there to deputy director and director. Left that role at the end of January and went over, I guess, to the dark side, to the private sector. And now I work for Barron Weather as a public safety solution engineer, which is basically just a fancy way of saying that I connect public safety entities and emergency managers with solutions to help them prepare and respond to weather events.
That's awesome. Yeah, Barron Weather. We'll talk about that at the end because I feel like we should give them a shout out for letting you on this, letting us borrow you for a little bit. But I know my county just recently got the software and we use it all the time. It was raining the other day at headquarters, like monsooning, and it wasn't raining at all at the house or my director's house. So we pulled up Barron Weather and were able to see how much rainfall we were getting and very quickly. And I was at dinner. I texted you the other night. I was like, it says hail approaching my house. I was like, no. But yeah. Bobby, just a quick thing about EC Sports sent us some supplements. I've been using them too. And so how do you like the EC Sports stuff so far?
So far, I've really enjoyed it. I mean, it came while I was gone on a business trip last week, and I've been using it ever since I got back. We've talked a lot on this podcast this summer about hydration and making sure that you're replacing your electrolytes as you sweat. For me, living in North Texas in the summer, that's a common occurrence. So if I go outside or think about going outside, I start getting dehydrated. So it's been really something I've made a point of this summer to hydrate better. And I've tried a bunch of different electrolytes. So the stuff from EC Sports it tastes good and it seems to keep me from getting that kind of downgrade of my energy after a workout. So I've really enjoyed it. I also started using the protein for in my breakfast shakes. It's very good as well. I got the chocolate peanut butter one. It was very good.
I was a kid when I got the cereal kind. What was it? Cinnamon Toast Crunch, I think. It's just like the milk when you get through eating. So it's great protein. And I like the fact that it's made in America. Like it's made in Travelers Rest, which is literally 30 minutes down the road. So I like that. So I appreciate them sending us the free samples. Bobby, just fair warning, don't call Jessica the weather girl. Like she will fist fight you if you call her a weather girl. We're in a group text together, and some of the guys will like poke the bear and call her the weather girl. Oh, she's gonna get her sass out. Watch this.
Yeah, I got it. It's right here. They made me a stash. It's right here. I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
that's the preferred time, huh?
I guess so. But they got me a tiara too. I got that somewhere around here as well.
If you put that, I'm taking a picture. Like,
No, we're not gonna put that on.
I do a screenshot real quick. I might need that for later. So we are definitely in severe thunderstorm season right now. And so that's kind of really why I wanted to bring you on and just kind of talk about the weather we've been seeing across the country. We've seen, flooding, mass flooding in our area recently. We saw flooding in Texas.
Mhm.
There's wildfires everywhere. So, and I think I even texted you this like a couple weeks ago. It was like, my wife and I were talking about it one night, and I was like, all right, things are getting worse with the weather, or is it just more publicized on social media? Like, are we really seeing more flooding, more disasters, or do you think it's more publicized just on social media?
I think it's a combination of both, to be honest. I mean, you're seeing, slight adjustments in global temperatures, and that can have ramifications, from ocean temperatures helping fuel hurricanes and their rapid intensifications to maybe our growing seasons, farmers. Those seasons are lasting longer, but that can also mean increased pests, more water demand. There's different things out there to look at. It's not just, it's global warming and the earth is warming. There's these small adjustments that can have some big impacts. But in terms of media and seeing it, I think it's hard to argue. I mean, social media has amplified the visibility of these extreme weather events and disasters, especially amongst younger people. So you're seeing it all the time. But then you got to be careful because there's AI. And, it's everything that you see on the internet. Is that a legitimate source that you're seeing it from? Or has AI, created pictures and, things like that to throw people off and make them think something is happening when maybe it's not?
Definitely. And we talked about in Texas, they were in a flood-prone area anyway. So, if that had not killed anybody, just been general flooding, we probably would not have made the news. But because we saw devastation, things like that, and people get killed, that made the news. So it puts emergency management personnel in a tough situation. When do you pull the trigger to evacuate? When do you don't want to set off panic, but you also want the general public to be notified and be made aware of situations, right?
You do for sure. And I think one of the big things that we all can do personally is make sure we're having general situational awareness. Making sure we're paying attention to weather forecasts, making sure we have a way to receive warning notifications. However we decide to do that, whether it's a NOAA weather radio, or maybe you've signed up for Code Red or Everbridge in your county, or maybe you have some apps that can alert you. So I think we all have a personal responsibility to be paying attention and have general situational awareness to these types of things. But also it is a tough call for an emergency manager because if you have to evacuate a community, that's a heavy lift logistically and resource-wise. You have to look at where are these people going to go once they leave? Do you need traffic control? Like, how are we getting people out? How much time do we have to get people out? Where do we send them when we get them out? So there's a lot of factors that play into that. And obviously, anytime you have something like that, that costs money. But I would argue that saving a life is more important than what the cost of that evacuation is going to be.
Definitely. It always seems interesting. Like, there's a neighborhood that kind of bordered our counties together. And every time it flooded along the river, like, we knew that neighborhood was going to flood.
Yep.
So in the past, we went to that neighborhood going, hey, you need to evacuate. And they're like, nope, I'm not going anywhere. And it never fails. That afternoon or that night, we're sending rescue crafts in there to get them off their porch because they're in water over their head now. And it's like, it's frustrating.
Well, yeah, it is. And, I remember back, I want to say it was during Hurricane Matthew in 2016, there was evacuations from the coast. It was the first time we had done lane reversals on I-26 to evacuate people from the coast. And I remember Governor Haley saying to the people who were on some of these barrier islands and the islands that you could only get to by boat, she basically said, if you don't get out, we're not coming to get you. We're not putting people at risk. This is your warning that it is time to get out, because once this picks up, we're not sending anyone in. It's too dangerous.
That's a big call too. Like, we'll talk about Hurricane Helene in a little bit, but I remember that call in Hurricane Helene. Like, we had said, when our wind speeds get this much, I think it was like 45 miles an hour, sustained winds, things like that, we're not sending ambulances out. We're not sending fire trucks out. And that morning, like 5 o'clock in the morning, we hit sustained winds at 45 miles an hour. And my EMS director said, that's it. Call it, we're stopping. And immediately a tree came down with a patient that was pinned up underneath it. And I was like, oh, and she's like, you're not leaving. Like, you have to stop. We're going to stop this. And so we just started triaging calls. And when the wind speed got a safe distance for our ambulances, but to be able to make that call, like that sucks. Like that's,
It is a
but
hard
it's a
call to
decision
make.
that has to be made.
It does. And I mean, Helene was a little bit of a different beast because of all of the rain we received prior to Helene actually arriving. So the ground was already saturated. So even before we were hitting those thresholds of 40, 45 miles per hour, you were starting to see trees come down. So you had to kind of take into account there how much rain had already fallen and how saturated the ground was. And that just, was a recipe truly for a disaster.
I think one of the things people can get confused is the difference between a watch and a warning.
That is, a lot of people do get that confused. I think the easiest way to think about it is, if it's a severe thunderstorm or tornado watch, it's a watch out, like heads up, pay attention. Conditions are right for these types of things to occur. When you're talking severe thunderstorm warnings, that's including winds in excess of 58 miles per hour and hail 1 inch in diameter or greater. And there's also the possibility of tornado development within severe thunderstorms. But the watch is watch out. Hey, pay attention. Bad weather may be on the way today. So this is your heads up that you need to be situationally aware of what's going on and make sure that you are getting notifications. A warning, it's time to act. It's time to put your plan in place. It's time to get to a safe spot. For tornadoes, interior room away from doors and windows. Same thing for severe thunderstorms as well. Flood warnings get to higher ground, so warning means you got to take action. Now it's not time to go looking outside and seeing what's going on. Can I see a tornado coming? It's take action. I experienced that during the 2020 tornadoes that we had here in the upstate. My parents were living with me at the time. And as that tornado went through Seneca, I, yelled upstairs to my dad. I said, you got 10 minutes to get down here and get into the bathroom. Well, he took his time, put his shoes on, brushed his teeth. And I am yelling at him to get downstairs because I knew that tornado was on the ground. We could see the debris on the radar. At that point, it's time to take action. Like we've got to go to our safe spot.
Everybody goes to the front porch.
All those years that we lived in South Carolina, we never saw anything when I was there. But as soon as we moved out to Texas, we had a tornado warning, sirens going off within the first couple months. And, the first time it's pretty freaky, but I've been here for 15 years now and the sirens go off in the middle of the night. The kids get their stuff. They go to the closet downstairs. The dog goes down there and we all meet up in the same place. And it's just part of the habit now. But the first few times it was definitely a cause for anxiety because we thought that it meant it was going to hit us specifically.
Sure. But you always
over time, you kind of get a little bit more accustomed to it, but still have a healthy respect for when it's coming and what it could bring.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I remember those hurricanes when they came through Seneca. Like I didn't have radar pulled up, but I had my radio on because I knew we were fixing to start running calls, and you could hear the radio traffic as it came across the county. Fires breaking out, power lines down. Like we knew, like you could track it by the radio. You didn't even need the radar. So what kind of alerts can people have on their cell phone? What kind of apps could people have on their cell phones to kind of help them with the weather alerts?
Well, I think first off is making sure that you have your wireless emergency alerts turned on your cell phone. Some people like to turn those off. So the alerts that you get that are the Amber alerts or the tornado warnings or flash flood warnings, you want to make sure those are actually turned on. So like in an iPhone, you would go into your settings and then go to notifications. And then you just scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says government alerts and emergency alerts. You want to make sure those are turned on. I know people don't like getting woken up in the middle of the night, but if it's a matter of life or death, it's pretty important that those are on. The other thing that I highly recommend is that people have NOAA weather radios. Those do have a battery backup. So if the power does go out, your battery backup kicks in and you're able to still receive warnings that way. So that also includes if, maybe there's disruption to the cell towers around, you're still going to be able to have that NOAA weather radio alert you. And then there are several other apps out there that do provide notifications. Your local county or jurisdiction might have Code Red or something like that, where you can sign up for weather alerts that way via phone call, text message, email. I know the American Red Cross app has push alerts for severe weather warnings too. So there are several apps out there, but I would say number one and number two, make sure the wireless emergency alerts are turned on your phone and then have a NOAA weather radio.
Definitely. And the callback, like the reverse 911, things like that. Those are important as well. Kind of touched on a little bit because I know we evacuated during the fire, we had a Code Red and were able to get contact with people that were living near the fire for Table Rock State Park, stuff like that. So it's important. It's tough putting manpower door to door to go knock on doors to get people to evacuate.
Sure.
Yeah. So while we're talking about weather apps, so when I pull up the weather app and it says 50% chance of rain in your area, what does that actually mean?
I get asked this a lot because it's confusing.
Sure.
Actually, so what we're talking about when we say 50% chance of rain is we're talking about probability of precipitation, or POP for short. And that means that there's a 50% chance that at any given point in the forecast area will receive measurable rain during that specified time period. So it doesn't mean that it will rain for half the day or that half the area is going to be affected by rain, but rather it's the likelihood of rain at any specific location within that forecast zone.
How big is a forecast zone typically going to be? So if I live in a city, is it typically that city or a larger county?
It depends. It could be a county, it could be a city. Depending on what the National Weather Service says, like for your area, if you point on the forecast, it would say 50% chance. So it's saying at that point, there's a 50% chance that that point might be affected by some sort of measurable rainfall or precipitation.
Very good. So I need to get a weather service that tells me where I am. So, because that's all I really care about, right?
I hope you know where you are.
I want to tell me the chance right here, because we have a lot of circumstances. I think, Dietrich was talking about it earlier, where he was at his office and it was raining, but it wasn't at the house. And we have a lot of east to west storms that come through the Plano, Texas area. And if it's just a mile north of here, we may not see rain.
Yep.
There's a lot of times where I'll be out of the house and my wife will call and say, we're getting a really bad thunderstorm here, and it's not even raining where I am, and I'm only 10-15 minutes away. So when do we get that app that's like really personalized to where we are to give us those warnings?
We're going to talk about Barron weather at the end of the episode. I think.
All right. I'm getting ahead of myself here. All right.
For the right amount of money, I'm sure she will hook you up with a personal account on Barron weather. So one of the things that in our text group that we talk about a lot, Jessica, and especially like when we see bad storms coming through, is about shrimps. And this isn't like the radiological shrimps we saw from Walmart, things like that. But it's on the radar. We are looking for shrimps. And like my wife thinks I'm crazy, but I'm like, hey, I'm texting Jessica. She's like, okay, whatever. She doesn't care that I text. She was like, hey, I'm asking Jessica about shrimp. So what are shrimps on the radar?
So shrimps are when you're looking at the radar, a lot of times when we're looking at storms that are rotating, they kind of have a little bit of a hook or a shrimp-like shape. So when we're looking for shrimps on the radar, and I think that's just the easiest way to tell people what you're looking for. You're basically looking for a comma almost. So kind of like a shrimp that curls in. You're looking for that because that's usually an indicator of a rotating storm. Meteorologists call them hook echoes at times, especially if it's a really pronounced hook that is in there, because where that hook is where that tornado development is in the storm. But a lot of times you will see, storms on the radar that might look like shrimp or look like commas or something like that. And that's just an indicator that storm may be rotating. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to produce a tornado, but it is starting to rotate.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for.
But so they know if I put the shrimp emoji in the chat, they all kind of know what that means.
Definitely. You want to go ahead, Bobby?
Yeah. So when you're thinking about major weather events, thunderstorms, hurricanes, what are the biggest challenges that you have in predicting those weather events and predicting their path and maybe all of those different aspects?
A lot of times you just need all the ingredients to come together just right. And in terms of just severe weather and thunderstorms in general, there are 4 things that you need. You need moisture, lift, instability, and shear. So you need those things to come together. So in terms of the moisture, we're looking at the water vapor in the atmosphere, and it's a fundamental building block to build clouds. We need water vapor to build clouds. In terms of instability, we're looking at warm, less dense air that continues to rise. It provides the energy for thunderstorms to develop. And then lift, we need something that's going to give that warm air a nudge and kind of get things going. And that's something maybe like a cold front or a dry line or the heating of the ground. Something's got to give lift to that warm air. And then shear is basically looking at the change in wind speed and or direction as we go up in altitude. So we kind of need all of those ingredients, and you definitely need the shear, especially when it's coming to tornadic development. So those are the 4 things that we kind of need to all come together at the right time. And it is challenging because the atmosphere can be chaotic, and small changes can have some large outcomes. And so we have to look at, those ingredients, but we also have limitations, right? Observational data, weather reporting stations, weather balloons that, put information into forecast models. All of this plays a role in trying to forecast severe weather. So when there were the cuts at the National Weather Service earlier this year, there were several offices that had to stop doing weather balloon launches or limit the number of weather balloon launches they were doing. So that causes concern for forecasting and how good a forecast may be, because we're not getting all the data into the forecast models to begin with. So there's a lot of different factors that kind of play a role, and they all just kind of have to come together at the same time.
What do you think your favorite type of weather is? Like if you're like, hey, this is what I love to forecast, this is what I love to study and look at, what would you say your favorite is?
I think that's a tough one. I think getting to experience, obviously, the incredible force of Mother Nature is just always fascinating. Whether that's thunderstorms or a snowstorm or something of that nature. But I also just love a crisp, cool, sunny fall day. Like, it's just nice, So I think there's it runs the gamut. But in terms of, fascinating and the adrenaline, obviously, it's kind of more of that severe weather and just the force of Mother Nature in general.
Yeah, at the tail end of summer here in Texas, I cannot wait for a crisp fall day. But we have to wait till mid-November for those. It's a long ways out.
Yep.
I think we're gonna get a nice week next week. I was looking, I guess it's gonna be like some 50s in the lows and football season. So we're gonna be here.
I'm looking forward to it.
What do you think is like your least favorite weather? Like, you're thinking about predicting weather things. What's your I dread talking about this?
I think it's probably going to be winter weather, because that point where you have rain transition over to freezing rain to sleet and snow, that is very tricky. Looking at those precipitation types and trying to figure out where that line is going to occur. So I think that's probably my least favorite weather to forecast, because it is so complicated, especially when you're trying to narrow down precipitation types in a specific area. So that would probably be my least favorite.
Definitely. I can see that, because the bread milk stores are going to have to go out
of
stock.
I know.
If you say it's going to get snow, we're out of food, we're out of water immediately. And it's weird, for us, that 85 corridor seems to be a big line for weather.
So I've actually kind of talked to the Weather Service about this, and kind of looking at the topography, of the upstate of South Carolina. We tend to use 85 as a dividing line only because everyone knows where 85 is. But the way I kind of look at things is south of 85, I kind of consider the Piedmont. And then if you go north of 85 to Highway 11, I kind of consider that the foothills, because you're kind of, getting into Paris Mountain and Glassy and things like that. And then when you get to Highway 11 and north, that's where the Blue Ridge Escarpment really starts to take off. And you see that really quick jump in elevation. And that's where you would tend to see a lot more in the way of rainfall or even snow or things like that. And we saw that with Helene. If we look at the amount of rain in the Piedmont, or the southern end of the upstate, and then moving up into the higher elevations, you're going anywhere from 5 to 6 inches of rain to 30 plus inches of rain. Elevation plays a role in that. So yeah, we do use 85 as a dividing line, but I think there's also a good reason for it.
Yeah, so that's a great segue into the next topic as we talk about hurricanes. We're heading into hurricane season now. It's that time of year. We've got a storm off the East Coast right now that doesn't look like it's going to be terribly chaotic for the East Coast, but I'm sure if you were in a ship 200 miles off the coast, you'd disagree with that. But what are some recommendations that you have for preparedness for hurricane season, particularly for individuals and families, less about counties and municipalities?
Sure. I think first and foremost, if you are along the coast or you are planning to vacation along the coast, you need to know your zone. You need to know your hurricane evacuation zone first and foremost. A lot of people don't think about, where they are in relation to this type of stuff, but it's really important to. And the way that you can find your zone is going to the county emergency management website would be one. In South Carolina, there's a website, hurricane.sc, where you can look this up. But in addition to knowing your zone, you need to know which route you're going to take to get out. That's critical because everyone's going to be trying to get out probably around the same time. So you need to know what route you're going to take to get out and stick to it. You also have to take into consideration if lanes are going to be reversed. And so you might be forced to go a certain way based on what those lane reversals are. So the key is to get out early and to know your zone, know your route. Otherwise, the other things that you need to do is have an emergency supply kit, and have a hurricane or an emergency plan in general. There's a couple of ways to do this, and I often tell people to look at the SC Emergency Manager app, even if you don't live in South Carolina. They did a really good job of putting this app together where there's already a checklist in there for you. So you don't have to try to figure out what I need to be putting into my kit. You can literally go into the app and check off those things that are in your kit. And I know if you go in there and try to buy all that stuff at once, it could be really expensive. So I tell people to pick up 1 or 2 items each time they go to the store and before they know it, they've got an emergency supply kit ready. And then in terms of the actual plan, you talked about how your family knows where to go when the tornado sirens go off. That's a plan. You guys have a plan for when those tornado sirens go off. We should have a plan for every disaster, This plan can also be built within this app. It also gives you a place to put your pet's information, their veterinary information, your insurance information, and you can actually build this into a PDF and email it to yourself, print it out. You can print out the family plan. Contact information is in there, medical information is in there. So it gives you the template to fill out the plan basically. So it makes it really easy and it's right at your fingertips to do.
I don't have.
Are there any things? So I've got the checklist pulled up right here on my screen from hurricane.sc, which was really easy to find. And what things on there do you think people would find most surprising that they should plan ahead for?
In terms of the kit or the plan?
In terms of your kit checklist.
A whistle. I think people would be surprised about a whistle. Is a whistle on the list?
There is a whistle on the list. Yes.
Okay. The reason why we tell people to put a whistle in their kit is if, they can have that around their neck, when they're evacuating into an area or getting into their safe place for a tornado, maybe they can't yell for help, but they could blow into a whistle and produce some sort of sound to help draw emergency crews closer to you for help. So that's part of why we tell people to put a whistle in their kit. And I think that would surprise people.
Yeah, that's a really good one. You also have local maps on here.
Yes.
Which I say you, but local maps are on there as well for, I think a lot of people get so reliant on GPS that we've largely forgotten how to use an old-fashioned paper map.
We have.
Dietrich and I have a little bit of experience in orienteering. I have more than him, but
I'm still looking around.
So
in Virginia.
He's still lost in Virginia. Long story for a different episode. But talk a little bit about local maps and where you would suggest people get them and what they're going to be using them for in an emergency.
So there are times, and I think we learned a little bit of this during Helene and some other disasters, that maybe your phone's not going to work. And Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever it is that you use is not going to load. And you've got to know where to go. I was one of those nerdy kids who loved looking at maps, like paper maps when I was a kid, and we would take road trips out west to Nebraska and Utah and whatnot. And I'd just be looking on the map to see where we were. And I figured out, mile marker, exit numbers. I figured out all of that stuff just by looking at maps. But we don't really make kids look at maps today. And even as adults, we've become so dependent on just typing in an address or a location into our phone, into our GPS, and it just tells us where to go. And we don't even think about it. But really, we need to be able to think about it. So paper maps you can order from Amazon. There are some gas stations that may have them, but they're always a good idea to have. And those get updated. So, I wouldn't go look at one from 1990. That's going to probably be a little too far back, but you want to get the latest maps and be able to read the map. This is a great thing to do with your kids. Sit down and teach them how to read a map. Not only get a statewide map, but maybe get a local area map so that they can look at what that looks like on paper and where they are. And you can mark the map up with a pencil or a pen. Just knowing where you are. I think that's one of the biggest problems too, is that let's say the National Weather Service issues a severe thunderstorm warning or a tornado warning, flash flood warning, whatever it is for your area. People aren't 100% sure where they are in that warning polygon. They could not point on a map and tell you where they are. If you give people a map of their county and tell you to point where they live in their county, don't put the cities on there, they probably couldn't do it. Right. They really couldn't. So I think that's important to teach kids, is like, know where you are in relation to the things around you. We've just gotten so used to relying on technology now that it just does it for us.
Yeah, I definitely felt as a parent there, because even Gage last night went to a friend. He's a freshman at Clemson University. So Gage goes down to have dinner with him. They meet for food, and it's raining. So Gage's like, hey, I'll give you a ride back to your dorm. And the kid's like, okay, I don't know how to get there by car. And so him and Gage are riding around. Gage gets lost on Clemson University's campus, ends up getting him to the dorm. And then he's like, calls Candace and is like, I don't know how to get off back to the main road, because he's literally on the campus, which is not a huge campus, but couldn't get lost. I was like, oh my gosh, we failed him, because he has no idea where he's at. I'm like, come on, bud. Like, you got to be able to get off the campus property.
Time to break out some maps.
Yeah.
And then next time I come, I can teach them how to orienteer.
Yeah. Homeschool, and that's what we'll do. So what do you think, like, the role of AI is going to play in the future of weather? Because AI, like, I use it pretty much on a daily basis, it seems like now, more and more. So what do you think the future is of using AI in, like, emergency management, weather forecasting, things like that?
Well, I think it's already playing a role. I mean, we might not recognize how much of a role it's playing. Like, in terms of emergency management, you can use it to help create SOPs, maybe write some plans, social media content, things like that. And it's already playing a role in weather forecasting too, because through AI and machine learning, you can, build forecast models faster and cheaper. But what's unclear is how AI makes decisions and how it came to a certain result in the forecast models. So meteorologists, like our local National Weather Service meteorologists, who focus on forecasting in a particular area, they can pick up patterns within these forecast models or biases within these forecast models a lot quicker. So the human element is still really important, but AI can help us cut some time off of some things and maybe get to a result quicker. But there's still that human element that's really important in it.
You said machine learning, like, maybe this is a stupid question, but kind of expand on that. Like, what is machine learning?
That's a good question. I'm still learning myself. We are even at Barron looking at AI and machine learning to help develop some of our processes and just being able to produce a PDF forecast and what that means. So we're starting to dig into that, not me personally, but our development team is. So they've been talking a lot about that. And it's basically, I guess, teaching the machine how to do certain things and, certain processes. So I'm not an expert on AI or machine learning, but we are starting to see a lot of this start to happen within weather, within emergency management, within public safety in general. We're seeing it.
Definitely. And then, like, kind of doing a flashback to last year for Hurricane Helene, how much time did you spend in your office away from your house?
Too much time, probably. I mean, I did try to go home here and there to get more clothes, things like that. I was one of the lucky folks whose power came back on that night. Not that I got to stay the night in my house to really enjoy it. But I was able to, come home and see when I walked into my house to grab more clothes or whatever it is that I needed to grab. So no, we all spent a lot of time in our offices during Helene. So we weren't home very, very much. If we did, it might've been for the night, or it might've just been to get some more clothes and supplies.
Definitely. I was super glad to see that I was hourly during that. I made a lot of money during that. But yeah, I spent a lot of time away from my family. So one of the things we talked about, like, on the Skinny Medic YouTube channel, was some things we learned about having food, having backup to backups. especially if it comes to power. Like we have a whole house generator, but we didn't want to necessarily run that the whole time. So having like the battery banks and things like that. I actually loaned out several of my battery banks to neighbors or friends. Matthew needed it for his CPAP, so I loaned out my battery bank for CPAP. Having water, just drinking water, extra food. We learned that for our crews because they're going to work, and now the restaurants that we normally depend on to get food for our crews wasn't open. So we're having to go outside or cook food, things like that. And oxygen was a big deal for us as well. People on home concentrators, home O2, didn't have oxygen, so they started running out. So we were having to put requests in from the state for oxygen tanks, things like that, and shelters. So lots of lessons to learn, and hopefully that was a once-in-a-lifetime event, but we know how those things go. So what are some things you think you maybe kind of walked away with lessons learned that the average person can take away?
I mean, I think we could talk for hours on lessons learned in this storm, but I think to narrow it down, I really hope it was a wake-up call for those living inland. We tend to think, the coast has to worry about it. This was not the case here. Tropical systems have impacts that extend far out from the center of the storm. And as they move inland, the storms actually expand. So that's why you see these far-reaching impacts. Helene made landfall 300 miles away, give or take, from us, yet we still had some serious impacts here across the upstate. And we actually saw the same thing this week with Hurricane Erin offshore. Did not come on shore. However, there were issues with storm surge, coastal flooding, wave heights, a lot of issues along the coast, a lot of reports about, North Carolina 12 being impassable and roads being blocked off and, roads being damaged and things. And that storm didn't even make landfall. The center of it stayed well offshore. So that's just an example of how far reaching these impacts can be from tropical systems. We talked earlier about how situational awareness is important and paying attention to weather forecasts, not thinking that it can't happen to you. That's not a mindset we should have. It can, and it will. It's just a matter of time. It will happen at some point. We tend to focus a lot on these coastal areas during tropical events, and that's understandable because evacuations due to storm surge, that's a heavy lift to do to get all those people out of harm's way. But, here further inland in the upstate, I'm more concerned about the storms that come out of the Gulf because those are the storms that put us on the wrong side of the storm, and that's exactly what we saw during Helene. If you look at a hurricane and you kind of divide it into 4 quadrants, the front right or top right quadrant is the most dangerous part of the storm because that's where your strongest winds are, that's where your heaviest rain is, and that's where you tend to have tornadoes develop in a storm. And for Helene, that's exactly where the upstate of South Carolina was. We were in that right front quadrant. So even though, it made landfall and it moved very quickly and we're 300 miles from the Gulf Coast, that didn't really matter. We still saw the impacts, and we're going to see those impacts still years down the road, especially in parts of Western North Carolina. You're still going to be seeing that cleanup and recovery effort continue. So I think it's one of the lessons is this does happen inland. It might have taken several years for it to show, at least especially for those of us who maybe were not around the last time something like this could have happened. But now you see that inland impacts extend far out from the center of the storm or where it's made landfall.
I remember sitting at the EOC and they were using the National Weather Service was doing their briefing and they were using terms like catastrophic, dangerous. And we were talking about, I remember sitting there talking to multiple people in emergency management and all right, is this just them being dramatic? Is this like Chris Justice being dramatic or were they being serious? And I was looking back, I was like, they're being serious. They were using terms that we were listening to and we were even kind of man, we picked up on those terms they were using. Luckily we were prepared as we could, but no one was prepared. I don't think to see what we saw. So,
well, I don't know that there's any way to prepare for trees falling on people's houses. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of where it's going to happen. And you just have to be ready to respond to that. Same thing with flooding. We had an idea of where that flooding would occur. We knew the Saluda was going to be a problem, and it was. So we try to alert people to get out of there ahead of time. But that was one of the things that was under our control. We couldn't control where the trees were going to fall. We knew that was going to happen, but we just couldn't control where it was going to happen. But you're right. They did use, and you noticed as they went through the week, the terms kind of started getting amplified, especially when it got to the day before. Thursday is when they really started talking about the wind issue in Helene. They had talked about the flooding issue with the predecessor rain event and Helene pretty early on, but the wind piece really came into play the day before. And that takes some time to process. What does that look like? What do we need to be preparing for in terms of the wind? Power outages, absolutely. But how many trees are we talking? How much debris are we talking? And, last I checked, I think in Greenville County, they picked up well over 2 million cubic yards of vegetative debris. So that's just an extreme, enormous amount of debris. They did. Their language kind of increased as the week went on. And, people love to say, oh, meteorologists, they never get it right. They can be right 50% of the time and still get paid. And it's like, well, meteorology is an imperfect science. It has come a long, long way for sure. And we're continuing to make strides in making forecasts better. But these folks have seen this. They're watching all of this stuff. They have the pattern recognition. The one thing that the Hurricane Center did not necessarily ping was the eastward movement of the center of the storm. They had the center maybe going over Atlanta. We were still in that cone, that forecast cone where the center could go, but the center ended up going right along the South Carolina, Georgia line. So that shift east had a big impact for us.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I still have nightmares. Every time I go back to the EOC, or there's so much about having barbecue, like I have flashbacks and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Fried chicken is mine from, the flood in 15 and Matthew in 16. I think that's all we had to eat at SCEMD was fried chicken every day. And so for a long time, I could not eat fried chicken.
Yep. I'm there because we had barbecue like every other night. I felt like, I appreciate their food, but I was like, have flashbacks like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this again. So
yeah, absolutely.
So just as a little, I appreciate bearing with them, letting us borrow you just for like an hour, but tell us a little about in case someone is not a civilian, they've made it this far in the podcast, but they are working for an agency, a department, things like that. Can you give us a little like spiel, sales pitch for Bear and Weather?
Sure. Bear and Weather is based out of Huntsville, Alabama. It's been around since 1989. Our founder, Bob Barron, was actually a broadcast meteorologist in Huntsville. And in 1989, there was a F4 tornado that tore right through Huntsville and it killed a lot of people. And he kind of made it his mission then to be like, we have got to do better. We've got to find a way to predict these things better, to track these things better, to get warnings out faster. We have got to do better. And that's when Bear and Weather was founded. And we started off on the broadcast side of things, and we still do a lot of the graphics that you see TV meteorologists use. That some of that is Bear and Weather. There are a couple of different companies out there, but Bear and Weather is one of them. But then we started expanding into other fields to include public safety and aviation and transportation. And we actually build radars. So all of the National Weather Service radars, when they were updated to their latest technology, that's Barron technology in those radars. So we are, a supplement, I would say, to the National Weather Service, not trying to replace them. They are partners of ours. NOAA is a partner of ours. Everyone uses NOAA data. Doesn't matter who it is. Some of that data is always going to be coming from NOAA. So now we have other solutions. In addition to our TV solutions, we have web-based solutions to include Barron ThreatNet and WeatherLogic. We have an API that you can pull data from. And then we have GIS layers. So we are an Esri Gold partner and work really closely with Esri when it comes to GIS solutions.
Perfect. Sounds good. Yeah. I love it. I use it for my service, my department. So thank you for coming on the episode.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll come back anytime.
Sounds good. I'm sure we can come up with some more questions.
Definitely. But hopefully we won't have any major new weather events for you guys to talk about in South Carolina between now and then.
Fingers crossed. We need a break. We really need a break.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And subscribe at civmedical.com.